least in the West. And so there's a lot of questions, both in our culture, from people in our community who don't know Jesus, as well as from Christians who know Jesus very well, on the topic of suffering. And so I just want to do a couple of objections, a little bit of fallout when it comes to these. Really, the objections are worldviews, and a little bit of fallout that happens if we jump into these worldviews. So the first objection comes just from our culture here in the West. And I think it's kind of encapsulated in this question: how can a loving God allow suffering? Have you asked that question? I have, lots. I've been asked that question lots. It is kind of the question that's on repeat over and over. So the question behind this question is, well, why is that the question? Like, there's lots of questions about God and who he is and how he operates and how we operate. Why is this the question here in the West that gets asked continually? Well, I think it's because of a particular Western mindset that we have, where, first of all, suffering is to be avoided at all costs. Suffering is the enemy, and it's just like nobody wants suffering, right, to begin with. But in the West, there is definitely, it's no to suffering. So here's the problem. And this is where it comes from, that suffering is incompatible with our culture's purpose for life. And so if you're wondering, well, what's my purpose for life? What does our culture say? What is our society? What's being pushed here? It's happiness. It's for you to be happy. That is the push, and it is super strong. And we're going to be taking in a few quotes from C.S. Lewis, because he tackles this big time in a number of different ways and a number of different books, but we'll be pulling mostly from Mere Christianity. He's got some great stuff in there when he talks about happiness and this drive or desire that's in us that has, I would say, crescendoed in our society in our time. So here's the deal. The pursuit of happiness has overtaken every other purpose. This is what we strive for. This is ultimately, we think this is what we need. And so our culture as a whole is chasing happiness. And it has become the justification for all kinds of evil things, both done and said, in the wake of this pursuit. It's a me first mentality. Whatever makes you happy. If this isn't making you happy, something's wrong, usually with the other people, not necessarily you. It's got to be them. And then if it is you, well, you gotta dig down deep and figure out and just change who you are. And then that'll make you happy. Which, of course, is it working? Anybody? Would you look at our community and go like, or let's just take the workplace, for instance. Unless you're a mom, because your kids are probably happy. Okay, let's go there. If you're a full-time mom, that's a good job. Very hard, but kids are usually not always happy, that's for sure. I don't want to go there any further. But take a look around the workplace, the banter, the talk. Does it sound like people are happy? No? Yes? No, I see a lot of shaking, but there's one heavy no over there. Where do you work? No. Oh, here at the church? No. Sorry. No, it's not working. And it's obvious, right? Everywhere you go, it's obvious. People are not happy. If you work in the service industry, they're not just hungry, they're hangry, and they want their food now and not delayed, and just the way they didn't communicate that they wanted it. What happens when what's one of the things that we can tell it's not working? So much despair, right? Depression, despair, broken relationships, more broken relationships than ever before. There's so much pain, broken families. The pursuit of happiness is actually quite a dangerous venture. Because pursuing happiness is like chasing the wind or trying to grab smoke. Like, it's impossible. It's there, but it's elusive. It seems elusive, but that's the illusion that when you chase it, you'll never get it. But that's the, I guess, the spell that our culture is under. And it's in all of us. We're not just looking at the people out there. It's in us. We grew up in this culture. We've all drank from the same Kool-Aid bucket. And there is in all of us this insatiable desire to be happy. And a lot of that has just been shaped from being born in a Western culture. So that's our culture at large. This is what C.S. Lewis talks about. And I think it's just perfect for today. God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God, and this is an incredible statement, God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself because it's not there. There is no such thing. So that leads us into our second objection, which comes from the Western church. I mean, we are products of this culture. And so here's the spin often this, our first question. It's like, how can a loving God allow suffering? Isn't God supposed to make us happy? Isn't he? If we do the right things, marry the right person, be good people, get the right job, if we did all these things, shouldn't we be happy? Maybe. But there's a few problems here. Like, even the question itself is, where does the question come from? It comes from a culture that has taught us that happiness is the ultimate pursuit. And so the problem for the Christian specifically is that the purpose of following Jesus is not to make you happy, it's to make you holy. We're finding that in 1 Peter. That's his theme. Be holy, because God is holy. It's to make us more like Jesus. That's what God is doing. And the pursuit of happiness and being more like Jesus, seriously, that's pretty tough to reconcile. Now, you might be asking, are we not allowed to be happy? That's definitely not where I'm going. There's something in us, I think God designed us this way, that there is this desire for happiness. When it runs amok is when it rules your life. When it is the main goal, the main pursuit. You are willing to sacrifice everyone and everything to achieve it. That's when it becomes problematic, when it gets too high on the priority scale. So, and of course, problem two is Western thinking around happiness has affected who we think God is and what life is all about. We continually would intellectually agree with, oh yeah, life's not about us, it's about God. As Christians, we've heard this a lot, it's not about you, right? And we nod in agreement intellectually. But we don't actually believe that. If we did, I think we would wholesale leave behind the pursuit of happiness as our ultimate goal. And you might be saying, well, what? That's not my ultimate goal. That's awesome. Maybe it isn't. But mostly it isn't a conscious drive that you're driving for happiness. It's something deep in us that drives us, and we often don't recognize it. But it colors the way we think who God is. We see God as someone who he hasn't revealed himself to be. Because this most certainly is not given to us in the Bible, that following Jesus is going to make you happy. Peter is going to give us a different worldview today, that's not what it's about. And finally, what's the fallout from adopting this worldview that happiness is the ultimate? Well, here's what happens. Relationships become transactional. And because they're transactional, they're disposable, justifiably disposable, because my needs aren't being met. I'm not happy. Therefore, you can't be my friend, or whatever it is, all sorts of relationships. And so it's just a transaction. As long as it's benefiting me, it's okay. Or if it's just causing me some unhappiness or uncomfortableness, well, then I'm okay to cut it off. That's from our culture. And then secondly, disappointment and resentment. Like Peter just talked about the root of bitterness growing just a few verses before. When bitterness grows, disappointment grows with God and others, and often it's pointed at others, and we're just scared to actually tell God that we're disappointed in him. I mean, I am. Aren't you? That's a pretty tough prayer, isn't it? Well, God, I'm disappointed with you. But is it true? Is that how you feel? Because if it is, you should probably tell him that because he already knows. It's not like you're hiding it from him. And part of being in relationship with God or anyone else is talking honestly about how you feel. And the Psalms give us the guide on how to do that, by the way. That's why some of them are really uncomfortable. It's like, that guy said that to God? Wow. But he's pouring out his heart. This is how I feel. And of course, despair. And we talked about this. It comes in questions. What did I do wrong to deserve this? Am I being punished? What's wrong with me? This despair overtakes us. Or then it can actually lash out into arrogance or contempt on everyone else because they're impeding my happiness. They're in the way. And finally, I just want to introduce this idea. We'll pick it up a little bit later. But when we fall into this worldview, our suffering is actually just wasted. It's wasted. Because there actually is, for the Christian, purpose and meaning for suffering. And Peter is going to highlight that in our passage today. So if your finger got sore with that sermon introductory that was a sermon in itself, you can turn to 1 Peter chapter 4. We're going to pick it up in verse 12. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings. Like, isn't that an interesting statement in a Western culture where the pursuit of happiness is all around us and in us? It's like, what? That doesn't sound very happy. Let me read it again. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or a thief, or an evildoer, or a meddler. Yet, if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. For it is time for judgment to begin at the household of God. And if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who did not obey the gospel of God? And if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? Therefore, so here's the perk of it. All that stuff that he just said. This is where we really need to hone in. Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. All right. What a great passage to come back in on in the summer as we suffer through no air conditioning. I guess that's kind of like suffering for Jesus, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him, right? But, we're going to be just an update on that. Things are happening. We hope to get that air conditioner in as soon as possible, because as hot as it is out there, it's way hotter right here. Okay, so I just want to split this text up into three three parts. The reason we had a longer introduction is because I think that kind of gives us some tracks to run on here on how we operate and our mindset here in the West, and the pushback we have when Peter says some of the things that he says. And we're going to, right off the start, number one, don't be surprised. Well, I'm not sure if I've ever not been surprised. And so I'm like, that is an interesting statement. Don't be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you. Don't be surprised. Well, in me, there is a little bit of rejection of this truth that suffering is part of life. God didn't design it that way. When sin entered the world, so did suffering. To the degree that we know of it now, especially because of our separation from God. And so it is hard to accept that suffering is actually just a part of life that we need to get used to. And if you look back through history, like look at all the suffering that's happened over and over. Terrible things have happened throughout human history. It's brutal. I love history, but sometimes it's hard and you're going like, they did what? Wow, that's awful. Most of the suffering that we read about in history and most of the suffering we feel today is usually caused by other people. The things that we do to each other, right? And so Peter is tackling this, starting off by don't be surprised. Like this is part of life. But it's more than that for Peter, because he's writing a letter to the churches, and he's not just talking about suffering in general, which is just the human condition. He is talking about suffering for being a Christian, for being a follower of Jesus. And so this line also applies to that. Don't be surprised that as a Christian that you suffer. And so you might be thinking, and you may never have, you might know Jesus, you might have just come to church today just to kind of check, see what we did. It's like, welcome. We're talking about suffering today. But suffering is part of it, and you don't have to look very far. You just have to look at the life of Jesus. Jesus suffered immensely. More than any of us have ever could even imagine. I can't even fathom it. But not just the physical pain that Jesus went through, all the difficulty and suffering deep inside. And you hear it when he's on the cross, like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like this just cry of pain, not of physical pain, something deep, deep within him. And so Jesus suffered. We use that statement lots, and because we've heard it so much, and we're like, yeah, it's so amazing that he did this for us. But somewhere in translation, it gets lost when it comes to following Jesus. What? Following Jesus, being like Jesus who suffered? Well, I don't know if I'm in for that. And so we need a perspective shift. And I really like what Peter does here with the whole test. At first when I saw this, to test you, what? What kind of sick game is this? But it's not. It's not a sick game. A game that comes from my Western mindset. And I need a perspective shift. And I think we all need it. We've all grown up here. So suffering reveals something that's deep inside. The shadows, I guess you could say, that kind of language, that lurk beneath the surface. Suffering brings them out. It doesn't feel good. The suffering is bad enough. But the things that come up out of us sometimes are even worse than the suffering that we were originally facing. And now we're like, oh man, this is even worse. But there's a reason for this, and we'll get to it in a second. So it brings it up, brings it to the surface, but suffering also purifies. That's that's why I think God has designed things to work or how he does his work through suffering, is the things have to come to the surface for awareness before they're able to be purified. And when Peter's talking about, this fiery trial, or when he talked about the judgment begins in the house of God, I think that is language for testing. This idea of purifying, the refiner's fire, purifying gold or silver, where the dross, the purification, where you have this pure metal left over and all the rest of it is out. That's what the language that Peter is using here. This is what's happening. Is that God is using this, or can use this suffering. This is his desire. Because he wants to shape us. Right? But we have a part in this. He wants to shape us through the suffering. And I want to let you know that suffering will shape you no matter what. So when I talked about, we're going to get into this in a second, wasted suffering, it's not like it's just like, oh, I've lost an opportunity. It is that, but it's more. Something else replaces it. And again, so a little cliffhanger. We're going to head to Romans chapter 5 for a few verses, and then we'll re-engage here. So this is how God uses suffering to shape us. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him, we have also obtained access by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we rejoice in the hope of glory of God. What a statement. And then this one. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings. Here it is again. Rejoice. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. And endurance produces character. And character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And so Peter and Paul just lined up perfectly here. This is what God is doing. This is his desire. This is what he wants to do through the suffering. He's going to take something, and if we think of Jesus that is broken and awful, he's going to make something beautiful out of it. I mean, through that horrible day for Jesus, the brokenness, the awfulness, the most beautiful thing emerged, and that is salvation for all mankind, available to everyone. It is incredible. That's what God does. So, second, don't be surprised. Secondly, participating in Christ's suffering. This is the whole rejoice thing. And I had in my notes, are you serious? With a question mark. So I'm not just trying to identify. That's me. I don't like suffering. It sucks. None of us do, right? And all of us, every single person here is thinking of something. Because we've all suffered. And I would say probably most of us immensely. At least in one, probably multiple areas of your life. And it's not just been for a short time. So why in the world would we rejoice? Well, I think for two main reasons. For the Christian, suffering has purpose and meaning. Right? We just read it in Romans. And why? What happens? So yes, we have this process. God's doing stuff in us, but how does this work? Because suffering naturally brings us to God. Does it not? When your heart is broken or you are heavy laden, where do you go? You go to Jesus. Go, Jesus, I need help. This hurts. I don't know how to deal with this. I can't do this. I can't bear this. And we've all done that. We've all been there. So it brings us to God. And then When we go to God, he can use our sufferings to shape us, to form character and hope and all of these other things that he talks about. Resiliency. And we talked about the refining process where it brings that, the shadowy stuff to the surface. Suffering helps us to let go of the things that are hurting us. Because there are people who hurt us, but who hurts us more than we do? Who's harder on you than you? It's like, oh, my dad. Okay, maybe. If you're a teenager, maybe. But seriously, there's so many things inside of us that we hold on to for dear life because we think we need them, or we think they're true, maybe. Maybe they're not even true. But we hold on to them for dear life, even though they're hurting us. I know, because I've been in this lots. And it's a continual process of letting go of these things. Because we actually won't accept that they're hurting us. Until it hurts so bad, we have to let go. And so that's also what God is doing with suffering. He's helping us to let go of the things that are actually hurting us. So it has purpose and meaning. Secondly, we get to be like Jesus. Like Jesus wasn't just a sufferer, right? If you read through the Gospels, it's awesome. What a story. Yeah, he suffered a lot, but there was joy in that man. And you could tell, just like, they don't even have to say it, because you have crowds of people crowding around Jesus to hear him, or around the dinner table, everybody's like listening to Jesus. It doesn't happen if you're just like, life sucks. Right? It doesn't happen if there's not joy coming out of you. People were attracted to him. And so this whole idea that our culture has, that suffering and love cannot coexist, like this whole idea of a loving God, we're missing a huge spot here. I don't know what else to call it. There's a huge hole because of our view of suffering and how evil it is. God wants to do beautiful things through suffering. And we get to share in what Christ did. Seems very foreign to us, right? Raised in a culture where happiness is the ultimate goal. It's like, oh man. And so here's where I kind of want to, before we can keep going, today's message isn't to make us feel bad and suffer more. The whole idea of becoming is really important to me. It means that I may have come this far, but I have this far to go, but I'm becoming. I'm I'm traveling this road. I want to become this type of person. And so if we can shift our minds away from kind of feeling ashamed for not maybe measuring up to what Peter's talking about here, because that's definitely not his goal. He's not trying to shame people into rejoicing. That's impossible. But to remember that we do have a loving God, that he went before us, that he showed us the way, that he suffered for us, and now it's actually a privilege for us to be able to suffer with him. That's difficult, but I'm getting there. And I want to continue to grow in that direction. So here's another quote from C.S. Lewis. Pain insists on being attended to. Just think of dropping a hammer on your toe, right? It's like, oh, did I do that? Oh, what's going on? No, you know. You hit that toe with a hammer, but it's just a sledgehammer. Let's go with that. Pain insists on being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to a deaf world. And I think that's why, as the Christian, we naturally go to God. If it's that megaphone, he doesn't have to shout at us, right? We know we're coming, right? Okay, finally, Peter jumps into this last idea where I highlighted the therefore. And it's this idea of trust, entrust their souls to a faithful creator while doing good. So trusting Jesus and doing good things. But this idea to continue to do good things. This idea of entrusting your life to Jesus, I think this, like he's given us some tools here, because if we're looking at this and going like, doesn't make sense, he's going to help us make sense of it. Because this is where it starts. If you want suffering to act, or God to do the things through suffering that he wants to do in you, it begins by entrusting your life to Jesus. You've got to trust him. Life is hard. It doesn't turn out the way we think it should when we were young. Very few people that I've talked to, if any, in fact, that I've talked to, I don't think any, that's turned out the way they dreamed. Because that was just an idea. It wasn't actual life. And where did the idea come from? You're shaped by our culture. That's where the ideas come from. That life is supposed to look like this. And so Peter gives us an alternative. We need to trust Jesus. Entrust your life to him. Because when you have this in your mind, when you're going like, I'm going to trust Jesus no matter what, it shapes the way you view suffering, go through suffering, and help others as they suffer. And this is an important one. And this is one of the reasons I think we're really, really bad at helping other people through suffering, is because we're horribly uncomfortable with suffering ourselves, and we're uncomfortable with their suffering. And so the things that come up and we want to say are actually to relieve our own discomfort with their suffering. It happens a lot. I've done it. But it's because of this mindset that we've just wholesale bought into. And instead of just sitting people with them in their pain, being okay with our own discomfort. We want to fix it because, there's a genuineness there too. We don't want them to suffer. We love them. So it's not just a shadowy side. There's a good thing there too. But we need to get a lot better at this. We're not very good. And we need to keep going here because I'm at the end of my time. So continue doing good, even in the face of persecution, this is the context of this letter. It was set up many, many months ago. Nero is the emperor. In the face of persecution, continue to do good, to submit to all the human authorities. And then he goes through and you're like, whoa, submit. See, there's a lot of words in this letter that don't sit well in our Western way of thinking. But my goal is to actually go through that, but we can't. So we're going to get to the so what. So I was trying to think of, okay, so how do we kind of bring this home? Because when we've talked about it fairly in depth. And so I thought, okay, just 3 challenges for us. First is suffering is part of life. We need to accept this at a deeper level than just intellectual, because we know that intellectually. For now. That's the mindset we need. It's not just period. Suffering is part of life, period. Suffering is part of life for now. So we are going to suffer. It's part of the human condition and experience. As Christians, we are going to suffer for trying to please God and live holy lives like Jesus did. That's what he did, and he suffered for it. And so Peter has given us kind of this roadmap. And he said this a number of times when it comes to suffering, for the Christian, specifically the example of Christ. And so in 2:21, it says, "For this," which is quite a statement to start this sentence off, For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you. So you've been called to suffer. Ooh, that's a whole nother level, right? Christ also suffered for you, leaving an example so that you might follow in his steps. Like how, again, going back, like look at Christ, the suffering of Christ. How did he do that? What was his response? How did he treat the people who were maligning him, who were crucifying him? In 3:18, he says, for Christ also suffered. When he's talking about suffering, he's reminding us that we're not alone. Since, therefore, Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking. And I think that's actually Peter's strategy throughout this letter, is to give us, they say to arm yourselves, right? So the push from our culture is to pursue happiness. And he's saying, arm yourself with the same way of thinking that Jesus had. That's not the goal of our lives. Don't get me wrong. I want to be happy. Like, I'm not saying we should be sad all the time or something. But I think you can understand where I'm going with that. And Peter reminds us that better things are to come. Like that's the for now. That's part of what helps us through the suffering. And Paul does it so much. In fact, some of his language is even like, whoa, that's even harder to think. But just in this letter, Peter's reminding us there are things to come, that God has given us inheritance that is imperishable, undefined, and unfading, that is kept for us in heaven by God and guarded by God. It's like, whoa, wow. And again, in chapter 1, it's like, set your hope fully on the grace to come. Right? It's like, that's where our hope is. That's where we set it. It's in the to come. That's how we can get through the suffering. That's how we can suffer well, I guess would be our next thing. And then finally, throughout the letter, he's telling us to live as foreigners and exiles because this is not our home. Right? There's another home that's coming. And this is throughout the letter, and that's why he's using that type of language. So secondly, the challenge is don't waste your suffering. I heard a message, it must have been like 20 years ago, and this had stuck with me. And it was about not wasting your suffering. I've thought about that. That's been in my mind ever since. It was that seed planted. I don't even know how long it was ago. I'm pretty sure it was in the early 2000s. But it's this idea we need to actually choose to suffer well. Now, this doesn't mean we hide or pretend or downplay our suffering. That's not suffering well. But rather, walk with each other and be honest about our feelings and pain. And the Psalms show us how. Right? The Psalms show us how to do that. They're magnificent. How to be especially with God, to be totally honest about what's going on here and here with God, because he knows already. You can't fool him. And part of the relationship is that God wants you to talk to him about what's going on in your heart and in your mind. And this idea of suffering well is this, I want to grow closer to God through this. I don't want to waste this opportunity to grow closer to God. And so we go to him first and we go to him often. And we allow God to build character and hope and whatever else he wants to do with it. Because there is purpose. That's part of the trusting part. There's purpose behind it. God's not just hurting us because he thinks it's fun. That's a different God. But here's the alternative, you guys. I kind of put this idea out there earlier that it's not just we miss the opportunity. Something else grows. If we don't grow closer to God, what happens? Well, Peter addressed it a little bit earlier. It's the root of bitterness. The alternative is bitterness and resentment. And we've all been there, right? Because I don't think there's anybody here who's suffered well every time. If you have, come see me after, because I want to talk to you. Right? The alternative, bitterness and resentment, and then we're having to deal with that, which is actually harder than the stuff we were suffering through. Bitterness, the imagery is that it's a root. It grows deep, and it is hard to pull out, and it hurts. And so that's why we don't let bitterness and resentment build. It's too hard to get rid of after. And finally, this is our last challenge. Let go of your pursuit of happiness. Why? Because it's killing you and me and causing pain in the people around us. And you will not find happiness by chasing it. It's an illusion. You'll never find it that way. And you can look at the history books, maybe, and our mind justifies saying, well, it's different for me. Okay. No, it isn't. One more quote from C.S. Lewis, a little bit longer one, from Mere Christianity. The moment you have a self at all, there's a possibility of putting yourself first, wanting to be the center, wanting to be God. In fact, that was the sin of Satan. And that was the sin he taught the human race. Some people think the fall of man had something to do with sex, but that is a mistake. What Satan put into the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could be like gods, could set up on their own as if they had created themselves, be their own masters, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside God, apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt has come the long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God which will make him happy. Let go of the pursuit of happiness. You have to do it intentionally. Embrace God's purposes and meaning for your life, including suffering. And entrust your life to him just like Jesus did when he said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. He's entrusting his life to God. And he's giving us an example that we can do the same thing. Father, I commit my spirit. I give myself, my life to you. Let's pray.